Hello there. Ark official servers have shut down, and I tried to tame everything in the game before that happened. The first 100 days were a rough go. I ruined a 140 Shadowmane tame after so many hours. Oh no. I had two 12-hour Reaper pregnancies and a deadly server crash that left me emotionally wrecked for multiple days. No, man. It was a crazy adventure, but I'm not finished. I vowed to tame everything in the game, or at least try my hardest, right up until the server shut down. I had less than 3 weeks in real life and 50 plus tames to go. But that wasn't all. I didn't learn anything from my first 100 days, and I decided to add another challenge. I wanted to fight as many bosses as I could. I spent almost half my 100 days building a ridiculously strong Rex army, and I wanted to test them out on as many bosses as possible. So, ride off into the Ark Survival Evolved sunset with me and see if I can complete the ultimate Ark challenge. It was a new day and I had a new goal in mind. After a 100-hour grind to tame everything, I wanted to take a step back and focus on my new challenge for the next 100. Fighting the bosses will be a nice change of pace from taming, but more importantly, it will unlock a bunch of tech things that I really need. That way I can use my tech suit on more maps than just Gen 2. First up, I wanted to go after the Ragnarok bosses. After taking down the dragon with ease, I knew I could face off the easier version of the dragon in the Ragnarok arena with my same Rexes. So I grabbed my things and I made my way to Ragnarok. In order to get the tech things I needed, I was going to have to do the beta fight, which meant I'd have to farm the tributes as well as the artifacts for this fight. And there is a lot. Once I got my spawn-in base set up, I went after my first set of tributes. There is an artifact way out here in the ocean, so there is usually a convenient ocean platform to land on safely. Because below this area is a terrifying mass of Tusos. My Tuso that I tamed was probably my strongest dino for water, so I brought him along and saddled him up. But as I made my way into the depths, I forgot how impossibly dark the Ragnarok ocean is at night. I killed off a couple sharks because I needed their teeth. But after a few minutes of near blindness in the ocean, I had to surface and come back later. I moved on to go after the snake venom and Sarco skins. Crocs and Titanoboa are everywhere in this swamp area. It's just a matter of running around and collecting what you need. It took no time at all to get all the things that I needed. It was daylight again, so I went back out into the ocean. I dove into the depths and came across more than enough Tusos. Now I just had to hope mine would be strong enough to take them down. After a couple battles, my Tuso was starting to get wrecked. I ran into an alpha and it was time to go. That thing is way stronger and faster, and if I didn't get out of there ASAP, I'd be dead for sure. I swam around a bit more in a different spot and I found the last one I needed. I killed him and I headed out of the water. Just in time too, because my Tuso really couldn't take any more. And with a little bit of time left in the day, I continued on more tributes. Right near my base is the best Spino spawn in pretty much all of the arcs. So I dropped in with Tina and I got lunch. Also, I grabbed my sauropod vertebrae from the Diplos and the Brontos. I dropped my stuff off at my base to end the day. I now had the Tuso tentacles, Sarco skins, snake venom, shark teeth, spinosails, and sauropod vertebrae all finished up, all in a day's work. My element reserves were running low, so I started the day with a quick farm on Gen 2. Except my Strider wasn't parked near space, so it really wasn't that quick, but I had gotten enough to last for quite some time. I also had mountains of Deinonychus eggs built up. I grabbed those so I could up my kibble stash. It had been quite some time since my addiction to farming loot drops had worn off, so I figured I'd head back out and do a quick lap. I spotted an Alpha Rex and it got me thinking. I still had that insanely powerful tech bow that I got so long ago. Now that I was going to be doing boss fights, I would be able to unlock the levels that I needed, and I could actually get to use it. So, when I came across an Alpha Rex, I knew I could get some levels this way. I equipped a random chibi so I could start leveling it up. My shotgun wasn't getting it done, so I had to bust out Tina to make work of this thing. Once it was finally close, I made sure not to kill it with Tina so that I could get the levels. And all it took was one. I unlocked one extra level. Now with the beta boss fight, I will be able to unlock 10 more, which will give me access to level 116 and the glorious tech bow that I've been yearning to use. I started out the day checking on my Magnavosaur. After the epic saga that was trying to get the egg, and then the annoying process of trying to feed it, not knowing that I could have just used sulfur and it would have made my life a lot easier. Anyways, I made my way back to Ragnarok to finish hunting down the boss trophies. Me and 5 guys flew over to the black sandy beach to find Megalania. I tossed out Tina and we munched on some Megalania to get their toxin, and it literally took less than 2 minutes to get what I needed. Next up, I flew around looking for Archies so I could get their talons. Luckily, they are also everywhere. Once again, I got everything I needed in no time at all. After the talons, I made my way back on the water. I needed to get Basilosaurus blubber, which can be quite annoying. Bazzies are somewhat hard to find on this map. When I found the first one, I tried using my Shadow Mane to take it down, but she couldn't get through the manta that protected. They were completely shredding my low-level Shadow Mane, and my Shadow Mane was no match. I really had no choice but to toss out my Tuso, but it was still severely injured from fighting the Tusos earlier, so I had to be careful. It should shred the manta, but it's all about positioning. If I can't get the tentacles to hit the manta, they will take me out in no time, so I have to be careful. After getting a couple, my Tuzo's health was way too low to keep risking it, so I left him out to heal because I was logging out in real life. And when I returned, enough time had passed that he was all healed up. It took some time, but eventually I was able to find the rest of the Bazzies and destroy them without losing my Tuso. I had almost everything I needed. The last thing was Thyla-Claws. I made my way out to the desert and hunted down some Thyla. They are pretty easy to find out here, so once again I was able to get this done in pretty much no time at all. Now I had all the tributes I needed for the fight, I just needed to get myself the artifacts. I went back to Crystal Isle so I could scoop them up nice and quick. It literally takes less than 10 minutes and I can grab all that I need. When I got back home, I finished the day by taking care of my dinos. I had a huge need for a meat run, so I spent a ton of time gathering all the meats with Tina. The final preparations began for my Ragnarok boss fight. I had a few more of my Ascendant Rex saddles I wanted to craft up, so I grabbed my best fiber farmer and started scooping up fibers. I crafted my saddles and saddled up all my Rexes and pumped them with any extra levels they had. I was curious how much damage they were actually doing, so I went ahead and tested them out at this point. With all the boosts, including the UD, these things are completely insane. For not having any mutations, these things are awesome. I am still blown away by how strong these are without souping them up. I cryoed my Rexes and prepared my gear. Once I got to Reg, I found the only terminal that wasn't cluttered with dinos. I got them all set up and I was ready for the fight. We jumped in and the fight began immediately. This was a big fight and a big win because it unlocked some things I really needed. First, the tech transmitter. Now I didn't have to rush to an obelisk every time I wanted to transfer. And with transfer timers on official, transmitters are one of the most needed things in the game. But also I unlocked tech troughs and a generator. The troughs do wonders for raising dinos on 1 times. I no longer have to log in just to check on my baby's food. And so once I got back home to my base, I made this a priority. I grabbed a bunch of grindable loot so I could get some poly. I crafted myself a couple troughs and a generator, and I got them placed down. Now that I had tech tier unlocked, I was going to need a consistent way to get lots and lots of poly. So I grabbed a bed, some foundations, and a transmitter, and I made my way to Crystal Isles. Farming beehives for poly was definitely going to be the fastest method. I also brought a mannequin because they are cheap to craft and have a ton of storage. I spent 10 to 15 minutes farming all the poly I possibly could. After completely destroying the Ragnarok bosses, I was motivated to keep running through some more bosses. Specifically, I wanted more tech tier unlocks. I needed to unlock a couple more pieces of the tech suit so that I could actually use it on the other maps. And the best way to do that was to go after the beta Rockwell. I packed up my things and headed to Aberration for the first time in these 100 days. But now that I plan on doing the beta boss, I was going to need to spend some time here, at least to gather the tributes that I would need. I spawned in and set out to search for a good spot to place a makeshift base. I put down my foundations and a transmitter and I was off to hunt trophies. There aren't nearly as many trophies as on Ragnarok, but finding the Basilisk scale can still be a bit grindy. Luckily, I found one right away. I really don't have anything powerful enough to fight these things. My Drake definitely isn't strong enough, so I had to use my shotgun to take them down. Even this level 15 is super tanky. But now that I had one, I just needed to find 3 more. As I expected, the rest were not so quick to be found. It took almost 20 minutes of searching to find number 2. I pretty much searched the entirety of their spawn locations, and I didn't see anything. So I figured I'd log off for a while to see if more can spawn back in. When I got back, I went back out on the hunt. Once again, I spent some time searching and found nothing. But I came across an alpha Carcanos. These are pretty rare, and you need a tribute for the alpha fight. I was not intending to do the alpha, but because they are hard to find, I figured I would go ahead and try to kill it just to get it. At the very least, I could trade it to someone who needs it. I started pumping it with shotgun shells, but they seemed to be doing absolutely nothing. Without HLNA, I had no way to know how much health this thing actually had. It was only a level 10, so I thought I'd be able to take it. My Drake had a super good Ascendant saddle, so I knew I could tank the hits. But what I did not know was this. Apparently they can dismount you. I did not know this. I am almost certain that the other alpha creatures cannot dismount you. At least I'm pretty sure that's the case with the raptor, so I just assumed that this was the case for all alphas. But I was wrong. And honestly, I might be wrong about the Alpha Raptor. I can't remember. Well, that sucked. My Shinehorn was definitely dead, but I wasn't about to just let my Drake die. I hopped back to Gen 2 to grab a way to get back to my Drake. My only option was 5 guys. Maywings can't handle the radiation, but I really had no choice. I found my Drake, and he was shockingly still alive. I tried to whistle him away, but lost control with my Maywing. We went off the edge, and I put myself in a really bad spot. My Drake was following me, but so was every other baddie in this place. There was no safe place to stop moving and cryo him. Before I knew it, dead. I went back to search for my body in the saddle, but unfortunately I could not find it. I must have taken too long in the transfer, and it probably despawned. This was an unfortunate loss. When I got back home to Gen 2, I had to spend a bit of time crafting up some things that I lost. While looking through my inventory, I remember I had a really nice tech rifle that I found a really long time ago. Now that I could actually use it because I unlocked tech, I wanted to give it a test. And holy crap! This is a freaking beast. I was hyped about this because I was going to need some firepower for the boss fight. But I needed to finish gathering tributes first. So, back to Ab. I found the first one and took him down with no problem. Now I just needed one more. I found the last one and I got excited. I started shooting him, but he was super tanky, and when I tried to get out of his way, my 5 guys got stuck, and I took a direct shot from his sleepy gas. I didn't realize it was happening, or I would have gotten somewhere safe, but before I realized it, I knocked out. And the basilisk ate me for lunch. I grabbed the only other tame I had with me, my Shadowmane, and I headed back out to see if I could maybe, just maybe, not get another Maywing killed. Nope. Pour one out for 5 guys. Also, rip Plan B, my bulb dog. That's now 2 light pets I've killed in a couple days. It was a lot to lose, but at the very least, I was able to get the final basilisk scale. So it wasn't all for nothing. All I needed now was venom, which I can get right before I go into the fight. I still needed to do some prep work though, so I made my way back home to Gen 2 to end the day. The plan was to do the Rockwell fight on foot, which meant I was going to need lots and lots of firepower. I did some quick farming and then crafted gunpowder for days, which I then turned into as much shotgun ammo as I possibly could. Since I lost 2 light pets on Aberration, I had to grab a couple more. I still had a glowtail and a feathered light, but I was almost certainly going to lose more, so I made my way to Rockwell's side to quickly tame one up. I got a Shinehorn tamed nice and quick. I was about to head down to Rockwell's den to grab a Reaper pheromone because I needed it for tribute, but I remembered I had one already in my inventory. Unlike most tributes, these can transfer across servers, so getting it here on Gen 2 was going to be much easier, and with that I was getting closer and closer to being ready to take on Rockwell. But I still need the artifacts, so back to my favorite destination to get them. Crystal Isles. I took the 6th man out for a quick artifact run. Just like the others, these are easily accessible. The hardest one to get is just at the bottom of a cave, but no enemies nearby. So I grabbed those quickly, and since I was here, I figured I'd do a poly run to end the day. I never can get my hands on enough poly. I did a meat run quickly at the beginning of the day to make sure all my Rexes had food to heal up. Also, I continue to raise Gigas and Karks because I intend to use them for the Titan fights eventually. I used my poly to craft up some Ascendant shotguns. The plan was to bring my super strong tech rifles, but I didn't know how much element I was going to have for ammo, so I made sure to bring shotguns and shotgun ammo as backup. I grabbed my absolute best gear. I crafted up my cactus broth, which is what allows you to do this on foot. The last thing I needed was element for my tech rifles. Since you can only transfer element dust, I had to convert my element into dust first. It's a time-consuming and extremely wasteful process, but my method allows me to do it passively. I built up some gates around a terminal to make sure that no wild dinos could attack me while I go AFK. The terminals allow you to convert element to dust at a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning if I want to transfer 100 element, I will only get 20 after I convert it. But thankfully, element flows heavy here on Gen 2, so waste is not a concern. However, to get around the slow process, I use an auto clicker. What I do is set my auto clicker to 5-second intervals, then place my cursor over the conversion icon, then I go AFK for as long as it takes. It's a bit slow of a process, but works perfectly if you intend to go AFK. And now I don't have to spend hours farming dust on extinction. Now that I had everything I would need, it was time to head to Aberration. When I got there, I had one last tribute to grab, the Nameless Venom. I scooped that up with my Shadowmane and headed to the Rockwell terminal. I took the 6th man down, knowing he'd take serious radiation damage. I thought I might be able to scoop him up, but there were too many drakes and I had to fight them off first. So sadly, the 6th man died. Pour one out for another Maywing. But my focus was on the fight. As long as I got this done, it would be a worthy sacrifice. I started the fight and popped my cactus broth so the enemies couldn't see me, and my focal chilling so I could run fast. I started running around shooting Rockwell's tentacles. My tech rifle was knocking them out as quickly as I had hoped. After the first round of tentacles, I made my way to his chest and started pumping him full of lasers. The tech rifles were great for damage, but they overheat so quickly. I decided to switch to my shotguns to see if it was any better. but this method felt slow, so I just remained patient. Next round, I knocked out his tentacles once again, but once I got back to the center, I could only do a little damage before he began his animation. When his tentacles reset, I went back for round 3. Having to avoid the electricity and giant electric balls flying in my face, I was able to get all the tentacles down once again. His health was nearing halfway, but time was running out. I was already halfway through the arena time. I started to get very concerned. These next rounds don't go any quicker, and I hadn't delayed at all, but I felt like I should have more time on the timer. But I continued on. When I started attacking his chest once again, he barely took any damage before he went into another animation. At this point, I was almost certain something was off. His damage should be lower, or I should have more time. There was no way I was even going to have time to finish this because he keeps going into his animations too early.
What exactly is your plan? Even if you could get past me to the surface.
But I continued on, hoping to take this fight to the very last second. Next time, I got myself way too close to the Nameless, and they started attacking me. This made it difficult to hit Rockwell, and once again, I feel like I didn't get enough damage in before his tentacles respawned. So as time was getting lower and lower, I rushed to hurry and get the tentacles down once more, and while trying to avoid the Nameless, I stayed as close to the edge as possible. But then, this happened. Whoa, what is happening? What? Oh my God? Oh no. Are you kidding me? Wow. That's a first. What the hell? This one sucked. Boss fight arkings are always the worst because you lose everything you brought into the fight, including all the tributes I used to start the fight, all my best gear, my 2 really powerful tech rifles, all gone. The only saving grace is I didn't bring dinos into the fight because they'd be gone too. However, I still sacrificed my rock drake getting tributes and another Maywing, the 6-man, getting to the terminal. I was pretty broken up about this one. So first up, I made my way back to Crystal Isles to get the artifacts again. I also grabbed more poly because I needed to craft more shotguns. I spent the rest of the day just gathering up all the things I'd need to get back into the fight. Since I can't seem to keep my Maywings alive, I started out this day doing what I hoped would be a final Maywing taming session. I flew around and tamed everything. And of course, I continued with the naming tradition. Number 8, I went with 8 Ball. For 9 lives. Hopefully that'll help him live longer. Number 10, I went with Tension Rises. And for number 11, we had to go 7-11. And to round it out for number 12, I went with 12 Angry Men. Shout out to you if you get that reference and if you were forced to watch that movie in school. After I gathered all my stuff I would need, I made my way back to Aberration. I went back out on the hunt to gather up my basilisk scales, and it pretty much took half the day just to find one. This is exactly what I was hoping wouldn't happen. It's taking forever. Some time had passed in real life, and I went back at it, hoping more had spawned in. I spent another half day running around the whole map. I came away with 2 more before heading back to Gen 2. I pretty much cleared out any basilisk spawns, so I needed to wait a little longer for more to spawn in. Since I only needed 1 more, I was hoping I could just grab it when I grabbed the venom right before I head to the terminal. I spent the rest of the day doing some things around my base, gathering resources and taking care of my dinos to kill some time. I also started setting up my XP farm so that I could grind out my levels to unlock my tech bow. Alright, I made my way back to Aberration, and within 5 minutes of searching, I came across the last basilisk that I would need. I quickly grabbed the Nameless Venom, and then I made my way back to Terminal for round 2. I didn't want to lose yet another Maywing, so I fed Tension Rises him some mushroom brew to protect him from the radiation. But it didn't matter, because when I got down there, the Nameless attacked, and he was not set to passive. So rather than making an error and getting myself killed, I just let him die. Sorry, bro. Pour one out for another melee. I'm seriously gonna have to build a graveyard for these things. But I didn't have time to worry about that now. It was time to get after Rockwell round 2. I was determined to not have to do this again. But like last time, I wasn't just worried about getting arked. My biggest concern was running out of time. This time around, I decided to use my tech rifles, mostly for the tentacles, and stick to my shotgun for the heart.
In the presence of Sir Edmund Rockwell, savant, scientist, survivor.
Everything was going as planned. First round, no issues. Second round, no issues. His health was dropping, but so was the time. Next round, my cactus broth ran out, and I forgot to pop more, so the Nameless swarmed. I was starting to worry about time. The Nameless were seriously annoying me and taking up my precious time. I lost my pants, but still had some decent armor to make it through. I kept pushing on, round after round, as Rockwell's health got lower and lower. I was getting close to the end, and I thought I was finished. But Rockwell went back into his animation one last time. I started to panic. I only had 4 minutes left on the clock. There it is. Victory! It felt really good to beat that. After that last round, I definitely thought I was going to run out of time. But now that I had Rockwell Beta, I had unlocked enough levels to reach my tech bow. Now, I just had to grind out those levels first. Back home on Gen 2, my Magnetosaur was almost complete. After burning through a ton of my element, transferring it to Aberration, I headed back out into space to do a little more farming. I spent a good chunk of the day replenishing some resources, including hexagons. But really my main focus was unlocking my tech bow. I finished setting up my XP farm with all my grinders, and I gathered up a bunch of stone to grind. I ate my broth of enlightenment to boost my XP gain, I filled my grinders with stone and wood, and tossed out my babies. And then, well, this is ruthless, Ark. Why do you make me do this? And in less than 10 minutes I had gained 7 levels, which brought me up to level 115. I was 1 level away from what I needed, but I was all out of babies and the day was coming to an end. So I crafted myself the tech sleeping pod, which I unlocked from Rockwell. This will give me massive XP, and by the time I log back in, I should have the extra level. I can't remember how much time in real life passed, but when I logged back in, I had a couple levels, and now I had what I needed. But even more exciting, my Magnetosaur was finally finished. Holy crap. I cannot believe how long this thing took. It might not feel that long if you are watching these episodes within a short period of time, but I assure you, this was the worst thing I have ever had to raise or tame or get my hands on ever in Ark, ever. I will never raise one of these on official servers again, even if I can use sulfur, because honestly, getting those eggs was the worst part. I was excited to use my tech bow, so I headed out to find some things to knock out. I searched for a Giga, but couldn't find one. I remember I needed to tame another owl since mine starved, so I snagged one of those up quick. But really, where the tech bow was going to shine was underwater. I headed down to find myself the tankiest beast of the underwater, the dunk. These things are ridiculously tanky. They take reduced trank damage, which I didn't know when I started shooting it. So I started firing away. But oh man, it took a lot of shots. Fortunately, they are big and slow, so it was just a matter of patience and avoiding all the obnoxious sharks and eels. I got him down, then went after a bassie. I think at this point I forgot to check it off my list. I had already tamed one, but I was underwater waiting, so I just tamed another one. When the donkey finished, I had to bring him to the surface to get him cryoed. But unlike last time with my bassie, I was able to get him with no issues. The last bit of the day, I decided to go after hyenodons. These things are incredibly skittish and seemingly impossible to tame. I isolated the one I wanted and tried petting him. I had cactus broth going, but I wasn't wearing ghillie. I thought I could pull it off this way. When I went in for the second pet, no problems. I stuck by his side, waiting to pet him again. Number 3, hey, this is actually pretty easy, no problems at all. But when I went up for number 4, I got the pet in, but somehow I spooked him. No idea how. And he started running. When I caught up to him, he was by one of his buddies, and when I tried to pet him again, his taming meter started to drop. I honestly didn't even understand the mechanic that was doing this, but I knew this was going to be an extremely obnoxious thing to try to tame. I was going to have to do some research to see if there was an easier way to get this done, because following it around, having to pet it 20 plus times, is just way too risky. It will almost certainly get spooked by something. At the start of day 116, I had some Karks and Gigas that had grown up. After losing Steve in a tragic fiery Maywing crash, I was very much in need of another imprinted Kark. So of course, I named him Son of Steve. I bred him with the ladies to continue hoarding as many baby Karks as I could in case I need them for levels. I was feeling pretty accomplished at this point after defeating a couple of bosses and getting a good start on my tames. I wanted to slow down a bit and build myself a bigger base. So I did a bit of farming, and I crafted up some stone behemoth gates. I found a nice spot not too far from my current base and started claiming my territory. I needed more element, so I took my strider out to space, but I forgot about the glitchy spot near my base. The strider went over the edge and got stuck. It disappeared and I couldn't find it anywhere. I checked to see in the triblog if it got anti-meshed, but nothing was showing. I figured it bugged and despawned. Well, that sucks. Now I have to get a new strider, which has been a pain each time. So this is pretty frustrating. Me and Eric Foreman went out to search for another one. But after half a day we came up empty-handed. Just as the day was ending, I came across something I could not resist. A 145 female R Giga. It was gorgeous, blue and pink. I loved the colors, but I really did not need this. I haven't been taming R Gigas, nor did I really need anything more powerful than what I already had. But how could I not tame this? She was calling my name. I went back to base to get my taming gear and went after her. Now that I had my tech bow, I didn't even need to trap her. I floated above and unloaded shard after shard from a safe distance. It still takes a bit of time, no longer than 5 minutes though. Much better than using a long neck. I got her down with no issue. Since there are a ton of bad dudes in the area, I fenced her in. I can't really leave render like with the Rexes or she'll wake up. So to make sure I get this thing maxed out with levels, I needed to make sure nothing could attack it. Me and Balthazar waited patiently nearby. I gathered some meat and some blood packs, but otherwise I just waited. It took a good 40 minutes, but I got it at almost perfect taming efficiency. And right nearby there was conveniently a perfect strider. It was low level, had saddlebags and a drill face and a really cool color. So of course I went after it. And after the tedious process, I was almost done with it. But a Dilo was nearby and aggroing to me. I wanted to be safe and get rid of it to make sure it didn't attack and reset the taming meter. But somehow, when I power punched it, the taming meter reset anyways. What the F? I'm not sure what happened. I didn't hit it. I was more than far enough away. I had no idea how that happened. Last time I got into a fight with a Sarco and it attacked me and the Strider, but the taming meter didn't go down at all, so I'm honestly not sure what happened. But the day was ending for me in real life and I just couldn't spend the time grinding this out right now. Getting a Strider back would have to wait some more time. But not a whole lot more time, because at the start of day 118 I felt lost without a Strider, especially since I was now building a new base. I honestly felt like I couldn't do anything until I got this taken care of and off my mind. I still had to walk it back to base, which of course takes forever. All the helpful people mentioned I could just upload this thing and download it near my base, but of course I didn't know that at the time. So the long journey began. This time I parked it near space and I just left it there with some dedicated storage. I next had my sights on the Gen 2 boss, Rockwell Prime. It had been a while since doing missions, but I didn't have that many left in order to unlock it. First up, I went back to the Bulldog fetch. Now that I had a tech bow, I could actually do this with ease. It's a nightmare with a long neck. I hunted down all the little bulldogs and tranked them with just a couple shots. A pretty easy task completed in just under 10 minutes. I continued on to the Maywing Poach. This is also a super easy one when you have a tech bow. I didn't set any time records here with my time, but I got it done quick enough and one step closer to Rockwell Prime. Before the day was over, I noticed something peculiar on the map. I saw an extra bed where it shouldn't be. And when I clicked on it, it was my missing Strider. Well, look what we have here. Looks like it didn't despawn after all. So since I couldn't see it, I was very hesitant to spawn to it, fearing that my character might mesh or get stuck in the mesh or something terrible might happen. But my curiosity is way too strong, and I had to find out where it was. So I spawned into it, and to my delight, it wasn't in the mesh. It was just in the water. Hooray! But I had no time at all to celebrate, because 1, I'm pretty sure there is no way out of this part of the water, and 2, before I had a chance to even figure out a way to get it out, a swarm of megalodons attacked. I lost hope immediately. There was no way it would survive or that I could do anything fast enough to even save it. I had no weapons on me, and since I already thought it was a goner and I replaced it, I just sat by and watched it get destroyed. RIP. My beautiful Argiga was looking all lonely. I decided to go out and see if I could find her a mate. I wasn't very hopeful because, well, I've seen like 2 Argigas in this entire 120 days. But I checked my go-to spot, and to my absolute delight, a 130 male Argiga. So I busted out the tech bow and I got to work. A few minutes later, he was down. And again, just to be safe, I put down the metal fences. Same thing as last time, I can't really go far. So I just messed around while I waited, and by the day's end, I had a really nice mating pair of Argigas. Taming this Argiga wasn't really necessary, but like I said, I couldn't resist. After that bit of a detour, I got back to the missions. I went into Star Dolphin. I've done this plenty on beta and alpha, but the gamma needs to be done as well. So I breezed through it and kept going. Up next, the Ferox Cull. It was time to hunt down some Feroxes. The alpha version of this is one of the more challenging hunt missions in the game, but like all the gamma missions, they are all super easy. Especially with a Kark, and especially with a Kark like Son of Steve. I continued the grind, Shadowmane Prowl up next. Just at the start of the mission, I saw a Purlovia. I had a little PTSD from these guys back on Extinction, but I went after this one to get it tamed. I think this is the first one I've ever even seen on Genesis 2. I don't know how common they are, but they are an easy tame, and I would have gone after it before had I seen them. I knocked it out, but it was going to take a while, so I continued on with the mission. It's the same thing with this one. The Gamma version took no time at all. Same with the Velostock. Super quick. It'd be nice if you only had to do the highest level to have it count, but such is not the case. The last of the tranking missions, which is even quicker than the others to complete. While I waited for the Purlovia to tame, I did some loot management. I had a ton of stuff to grind, so I cleared out my loot stash of all the unnecessaries. I grabbed my kibbles and went off to feed the Purlovia. First half of the day I spent on maintenance. I managed my overflowing resources, collected more blood packs, and took some time to farm some metal in space. But after that, I went right back to the missions. I grabbed some gear for these ones because they were a bit more of a challenge than the others. Nothing over the top, but having to redo these ones multiple times can get extremely time consuming. So I made sure to be prepared. I started up Choose Your Own Adventure and made my first attempt. I entered the arena and immediately was attacked by tapajaras. And just seconds later, I got caught in a capro. Before it shredded my armor, I figured I'd just restart. Okay, round 2, here we go. The hardest part about this round is the stupid tapajara. They swarm you and make it impossible to move. I got past them quick enough though and moved on. Next up, I hunted down the colored dinos in this maze-like arena. I always get lost in here. By the time I find my way, I usually forget which color I needed to remember. But I was able to get all the dinos and made the right choice at the end. On to the final room. I just needed to get all the floor plates. Sometimes you get lucky and they are in easy locations. But I did not get that luck this time. The one all the way up top can be a bit annoying to get to. As I made my way up, I got close, but on the final jump pad, I mistimed my jump, and I fell to my death. You can't use your tech suit, so tech boots won't save you. However, a glider suit will. Something I probably should have had on me at the time, but I didn't think about it. So, round 3. I made it through the first 2 rooms nice and quick once again, and back to room 3, I had the same issues. My platforming skills are incredibly bad. In fact, I am seriously not a fan of platforming games. Once again, the fall damage got the best of my health, and before I had a chance to heal... Okay, this is getting super annoying. It's supposed to be really easy, but it's taking way longer than I wanted it to. Round 4. After 2 deaths from falling, I made the smart decision to get my glider suit. Back in the final room, I still had an annoying time dealing with the tapajaras. Every time I jump, they hit me, and it stops my jump. If they hit me mid-air, I just drop to the ground. They are incredibly frustrating, and eventually my chest piece broke, which meant I had no more glider. And because one of the keys was in the worst spot all the way up top again, I didn't even bother going for it. So I just quit so I could get a new chest piece and a new glider. Okay, round 5. So this time I grabbed my best armor. Super OP for this, but I could not continue doing this. It was so annoying. Mostly because of how easy it should be, but because of how long it's taking. This time in the final room, there were no tapajaras, just some onyx to deal with instead. Much, much, much easier. And because of it, I was able to finally pass it. Now I had to finish with taking on the summoners. I hit the platforms, took down his shields, and lit him up with my tech rifle. Finally! That took over an hour in real life, and I was so annoyed. I needed to cool down after that and do something a little less stressful. I spent the rest of the day continuing to work on my new base, finishing off the gates for my new space. I continued working on gathering metal for my base for a while before I jumped back into the missions. I went for the Code Red mission next. Another on-foot one that definitely required some armor. I didn't even bother this time. The first time in, I brought my best armor and a glider suit. I brought one of my stronger Rexes as well. I made my way through the corridor, blasting through VR spiders, bats, and all the toxic bugs and creepy crawlies. I navigated my way through some stupidly overpowered fans and dodged the turrets. I continued through to destroy the security guard defense units, and I unlocked the door for my Rex. We made our way through to the next room to save as many biopotted dinos as we could. I wasn't worried about saving them though, so I just hung out near the door until the time ran out. Then I was off to flip the final switches and unlock the last door. I sprinted for my life to get past all the exploding biopods. On the second one, I had a very close call. Luckily, I got out of there without getting stuck, and I headed into the final room, where I would face off against the infected Giga. I sent my Rex in to attack while I lit him up with my rifle, and unlike the last mission, I was able to get it done in my first go. I continued grinding out these missions. I just had one left to go. So I jumped right into the life support mission. This one being the easiest of these on-foot missions, I cruised right through it. I restored power to the terminals, fixed the malfunctioning air supply tanks, and I beasted the malfunctioning tech and strider with my Rex. All in a day's work. It was time for Rockwell Prime. I was very confident about this fight. I had no doubt my Rexes could handle the Gamma. I would have liked to do this on beta, but the grind for beta missions is much harder. It would have taken a lot longer, and I already spent enough time on Choose Your Own Adventure mission. So, here we go. I spawned in and had a bit of a panic attack when I thought only a couple Rexes made it in. But it's just a weird thing, they all spawn in on top of each other. I headed into the Rockwell with my squad.
Something tells me that this is the easy part.
It was a quick and easy fight, and now I had some more unlocked levels. And even more importantly, now I had an exomech. Now that I had it, I could work on my base without worrying about being super wasteful. So I crafted a ton of structures and started on my base's foundation. I love base building, even though it's pretty janky in this game. It's one of my favorite things to do. And since I was in a more relaxed state of play and not so focused on grinding out my challenges, I really took some time with it. I continued into the next few days working on my new base, going back and forth between the endless process of meticulously placing down my structures and grinding out the absurd amounts of metal and crystal I would need. I swear there is something weirdly satisfying about having to place down all these structures rapidly. But sometimes I wish it was a more streamlined process because it does take forever. But over the course of these 4 days, I pretty much spent the entirety working on my base. I decided to take a bit of a break and get back to taming. I grabbed 8-Ball and Sprinkles and we headed to Aberration. First on the list was a Ravager. These are everywhere here and I should be able to get one quickly. I found a pack and netted the one I wanted. While he was taming, I went to find a Megalosaur, the Sleepy Dino. These are also everywhere on Ab, so I knew it would be another quick one to find. I posted up somewhere safe and tranked the one I wanted. There were 2 here, so I just knocked them out both, just in case one doesn't work out. These were going to take some time, so I went back to grab my Ravager. Since I didn't plan to use these, I didn't really care about the level. I just waited until the level 20 finished, and I decided to leave the other behind. So I realized another one of my tames starved to death. No big deal, I wasn't very attached, but I did want to grab myself a new one. So I flew out and found one quickly. This thing had some of the coolest colors I had ever seen. I was absolutely in love with it, so I tamed it. While it tamed, I got myself more hexagons, but then I went right back to base building. I was getting closer and closer to being done, and I had a really good idea of what I wanted it to look like at this point. So I was super anxious to get it done, and I just kept grinding it out. The first floor of my base was all finished, so I began the process of moving. Another tedious process, and I knew it was going to take some time. I only moved my babies and feeding trough to start because I had spent so many days now on the base, I wanted to get back to some other things. Those tames and other bosses were calling my name, and so was Scorched Earth. I have not yet gone to this Ark, and there were some things I needed to take care of. Specifically, this is the only place to get a Phoenix, so I wanted to at least get my base set up here so that I can spawn in safely. So off I was. I grabbed 8-Ball and we found ourselves a nice, safe, high spot to put a little makeshift base. For now, I wasn't planning on staying. The goal was to bring over a bunch of the things I needed and just play on this map for a few days. Getting the Phoenix was going to be annoying, and I'd have to wait for the extreme heat. I figured the best way to do it is just to take care of a bunch of tames on Scorched Earth, so that would allow me to spend as much time here as I could in order to be here when the event happens. I jumped back to Gen 2 once I got the base set up, and I made my way back into the ocean of Gen 2 to go after an anglerfish, something I had struggled to tame before without a faster taming method. But now that I have a tech bow, all I need to do is find one. Eventually, though, I was able to find a good enough one, and I unloaded my arrows. These things wake up pretty fast, so I stuck around him, just shooting some sharks until it finished. My base is really coming along, and it's really hard not to just work on it until completion. I've already spent more time than I'd like to, but now I'm so invested in it, I just needed to get it done. So back to the grind of farming resources and placing my structures. After half a day of standard maintenance around the base, I went off to tame something that was going to require a little more effort, a rock golem. I grabbed my mech and some cannon shells and headed over to Rockwell. I know the traditional method is to use a trap and a cannon, but I was hopeful I could just get it done with my mech. I found a nice high level 130 to tame. This was important because having high health meant there'd be a lower chance of me accidentally killing it. So I got my mech set up and aggroed the big slow pile of rocks to me. I kneeled down and launched my cannon into his face. You have to hit them right in the face to get the torpor, otherwise it just does massive damage. I checked with HNLA and all looked good. 7,000 torpor of the 18k I would need. So I was just going to need to hit him 2 more times right in the face. I lined up my second shot and fired away, but this time he had the high ground, and my 2 shots hit too low. His health was now down to 2k, and 1 more shot would kill him if it wasn't perfectly placed. I tried to be careful, get back to the high ground. I lined up my shot, but just as I fired, he bent over to pick up his rocks, and my shot missed his dome. Instead, dead. Luckily, though, there was another high-level one nearby. I tried to be very careful with my shots. I lined it up once again, and I took that first shot. When I checked HLNA, it appeared it connected. There was once again 7,000 torpor damage, but I also did a ton of damage to him. I was going to have to be really careful if I was going to get this thing tamed. With his health now down to just under 7k, he'd only be able to take 1 more shot, so I could not miss again if I was gonna get him. I pretty much lost confidence, and I was certain at this point that I was gonna have to find a new one. But as long as he is alive, I might as well keep trying. I lined up shot number 3, and it hit! It did about 3k damage to him, and another 7k of torpor. This meant I only needed 1 more shot to the head. I regained hope. I could get this done as long as I was careful. So I made sure to gain high ground. I waited very patiently until he was in a perfect position, and I took my shot. Boom, we got him. With just over 2k health left, another shot would have killed him for sure. Now I just gotta wait. I went back to base to grab some sanguine elixir to speed up the process, and when I got back, he was basically all tamed up. It's moving day. It's time to start breaking down my old base and officially moving into my new place. I spent the whole day getting my structures organized and placed at my new spot. Now that I finally felt my new base was in a livable condition, it was time to spend some time on Scorched Earth. As I mentioned, I wanted to spend some time here so that I could be here when the weather event hits. That way, I could find me a phoenix. So I grabbed a ton of gear so that I could basically just live here for the next few days. I planned on taming a few other Scorched dinos that I had not gotten yet. And I also wanted to take on the Scorched boss, the Manticore. I figured I could gather the artifacts here too, instead of going to Crystal Isles. That way I could spend as much time as possible. My plan is to go for the Alpha Manticore because I was so confident in my Rexes. First up though, I went after the easier stuff. I found a thorny dragon right near my base and I netted him up. Right near that there was a Lymantria, another easy knockout. These two were both very low level and it's also an Evo event, so I just stood by the 2 and I waited for them because they won't take long at all. While waiting though, I did attempt to take a Morellatops, but it was bugged or stuck in the rocks or something weird and my shots weren't even counting. So I just left it. The thorny finished in no time at all, and not long after the Lymantria as well. Once those finished, I went after another Morellatops, which are everywhere anyways. This is basically the Parasaur of this map, and they are incredibly easy to tame. so I got him in no time. I wanted to spend a lot of time here, but these tames went so quickly. I didn't know how much time I'd actually end up being here. I kind of just waited around a little while my element dust converted to hard element, but without any superheat, I decided to make my way out to the desert and be more productive. I needed to collect 20 of each of the wyvern talons in order to activate the alpha boss, so I figured I'd get started on that process. And I also needed deathworm horns to tame a mantis, so I searched for those as well. The day was nearing the end and I didn't have much luck finding them, so I just headed back. On my way, I ran into a fellow survivor. I saw them sitting up high on their wyvern with a parasaur. I didn't even need to ask, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were waiting for a phoenix, just like me. Instead of trying to compete to try to tame the only one that spawns in, I decided to log off for now and let them have this one. Besides, I didn't know when the weather event was going to happen anyways. Now that some time in real life has passed, I went back to my Scorched Earth objectives. I got a few more talons while over near the Wyvern Scar, but it was time to go after another tame, the Arthropleura. I tossed on my ghillie armor and ate my cactus broth just to be extra safe. These guys are passive and they like Broth of Enlightenment the most, so I grabbed my broth and I went up to him. I now had this really gross bug that will never ever come out of its cryo. Disgusting. While out in the desert, my jerboa warned me of a sandstorm. Not the weather event I was looking for, unfortunately. I decided to make my way back to base and wait out the storm. Afterwards, I went right back out and hunted down a vulture. Another passive tame, so I made sure to use up my cactus broth. I made sure to clear the area so that he didn't aggro to anything, and then I fed him his spoiled meat. It didn't take much, and I got myself yet another tame. And in this same exact spot, I just kept up the taming. I found a really low-level Titanoboa, and I knocked him out, only to quickly realize it's not a passive tame. You need to lay out some fertilized eggs for him to eat. I thought maybe I could just drop them and wait for him to wake up, but he wasn't waking up anytime soon. Instead, he just ate them all at once while he was sleeping, and his taming meter barely went up. So instead of waiting for him to wake and do this proper, I just found a different one. I had plenty of eggs, so I wasn't worried about wasting them. I found another one quickly, not too far, and I tossed down the eggs. He aggroed to them just as I expected, and ate them all at once, again, which I did not expect. And the taming meter only went up 1 feeding's worth. I just assumed that I could do this way, but I see now that that's not gonna work. So I knew I was just gonna have to do this one at a time, and instead of building a trap, I just hovered over the top of him and dropped off his eggs. One by one, he ate his snacks, and eventually, I got myself a snake. I took Balthazar down into the Wyvern Scar to speed up the process of gathering talons. We shredded through wyvern after wyvern, including an alpha wyvern, which was no match. After about 20 minutes, I had almost half of what I needed. The whole trench was cleared out, so I went off to do something else while more spawned back in. I took Trops out for a lap around the desert to search for deathworms. I found my first target right away. I let Balthazar do his thing and I grabbed my deathworm horn. We continued hunting them down until I had what I needed. I was surprised by how quickly I got them. I didn't even have to go a full lap around the map. Now that I had the food I needed, I went after a mantis. They are everywhere out here and I found the one I wanted right away. I went with the trap method to make my life easier. Anything comes near this mantis and it will attack it, dropping its progress. So a trap is the way to go. I got him inside, went out of render quickly, and when I came back, he was calm and ready to be fed. I gave him his horn and just waited patiently. Literally can't get a lower level than this, so it didn't take much time at all. And while I was out here, I hopped back down into the Wyvern Trench to finish my trophy farming. At the very start of the day, just when I logged in, my good jerboa friend let me know of the impending heat storm. After 3 full days here, I finally had one. I got excited because I had the full length to go and search for a phoenix. I grabbed 8-Ball and off we went. I've never even seen one of these things out in the wild, only ones that people have tamed. So I wasn't exactly sure how high he was gonna be spawning in. But I set 8-Ball at a reasonable altitude and cruised around as much area as I could. But sadly, even after searching at least half the map, I didn't see anything. At this point, I was a bit annoyed. Having to wait for these storms is an impossible task when Ark is shutting down soon, and I have a ton of other things to do. I knew in my heart the reality of taming a phoenix in a time crunch situation. It's gonna be very unlikely. But I decided to take out my parasaur and see if I could use the radar to find his ashes instead. Again, this is an absurdly tedious task to have to search the whole map, so after not very long, I gave up. So instead of hanging out here, doing nothing, waiting for another storm, I headed home to Gen 2. I was still okay with Maywing numbers, surprisingly, but I wanted to grab a few more that I could use as dedicated baby raisers. I knew I had to get myself another rock drake, but I also had my eyes set on a basilisk. So at the start of the day, I made my way to Aberration to go after some more drake eggs. Last time I got the eggs from Fjordor, but now that I had a tech suit unlocked, Aberration is my comfort zone. I can easily drop in, grab the eggs, and fly out without barely even touching the ground. And since there's not a narrow pathway out like on Fjordor, it feels safer when flying. Except when this happens. A mid-air strike by a rock drake? Honestly, I wasn't even that mad. Really more just impressed. However, a little annoyed because now I had to hop back to Gen 2 to get a new tech suit so that I could go back and get the eggs. And of course, since this is the first time getting the eggs from here, my first run through was not going to yield very many because we all know at this point that the eggs spoil. But I planned for that, so I wasn't frustrated when I found out. I still came away with 2 eggs though, so that's a good start, and I could at least raise one of them. I ended the day back on Gen 2 doing some element farming while I waited for more eggs to spawn back in. It was a new day and I headed back to Aberration. I dropped down into the depths and I made my run through of the Drake Trench. A quick and easy process, and I came away with 8 solid eggs and none of them spoiled. Back on Gen 2, I set them aside for when I'm ready to go after the basilisk. I had a random itch to return to attempting to tame a titan, something that I have not yet been able to conquer. So I spent a portion of the day beginning my usual preparations. I crafted a ton of gunpowder and made my cannon shells. I prepped my mechs as well. But this time, I needed a win. So I decided to go after the easiest titan to tame, the OG, the Titanosaur. I gathered up everything I would need and headed to Crystal Isles. I pretty much see these things wandering around here all the time, so I was confident I could find one. I headed out with 8 Ball, and literally within 1 minute there was one just graciously roaming right near my base. This was perfect and it felt like a sign. I am getting this thing tamed no matter what. But first, let me get away from this stupid Microraptor. I tossed out my mech and loaded him up with cannon shells. I got into the right position and I made my attack. It looked like a perfect hit, but I had no way of knowing for sure. I backed off and continued to fire. Fortunately, he has a ton of health, so killing him shouldn't be a concern. I had a ton of ammo, so running out wasn't a concern either. I kept firing away, shot after shot, waiting for him to fall to the ground, and uncertain if my shots were doing any torpor damage. But at one point, he started running away. I knew this must be it. I tried chasing him down for the final shots. But after another shot, I started to get worried. I really wanted to check his torpor to see if it was actually working. I crafted myself a magnifying glass, and I got really close to him. There it was. I was super close. This got me so hyped. I raced back to my mech and I got into position. Finally, my first Titan. Let's go. I killed some things in the area and then left him behind because, well, there's nothing else I can really do with him. But nonetheless, it felt really, really good to tame him. I've never even tamed this thing before, and finally I got one of these frustrating titans done with, even if it was the easiest one. I took my eggs to Crystal Isles because I knew I'd have better luck finding a basilisk here. Me and 8-Ball headed out to the desert area of the map and started searching. It didn't take long at all to find one, just as I had hoped. The taming method is similar to the snake. Drop eggs and it will eat them. But the basilisk is much faster and much stronger than the snake, so I decided to try to put together a trap for it. This was a makeshift and unproven trap. I had no idea if it would actually work. Once it was set up, I attempted to lure him in. But my design was totally incompetent, and the basilisk went right over the top. Making it go up higher only seemed to prevent him from even getting into it, so I decided to just make an attempt without the trap. I have my tech suit, so I can at least do it the easy way and just float above him. He went underground and I dropped an egg right on his hole, but he did not seem to be interested in eating it. Eventually, he sort of got stuck in my trap. This was an accident, but I tried to take advantage of it. I dropped the egg in on top of him and he ate it. His taming meter shot up to 33%. But immediately, it started to drop, and started to drop rapidly. In just a few seconds, it was back down to 0. I thought maybe it's because I needed to drop all the eggs at once, but everywhere I looked for information says the basilisk has a slow feeding interval. So even if I dropped all the eggs at once, it would still only consume one at a time. This would be impossible, considering how fast his taming meter dropped. Either this was a bug, or I was doing something wrong, really, really wrong, that I did not know about. For now though, I had no patience, and I didn't want to waste my drake eggs, so I went back home to Gen 2. But I was determined to get this thing tamed, so I did a bit of research. And I discovered the official best way to tame these things, and I decided to go right back into it. But first I had to get a light pet. This little guy is apparently the key to taming the basilisk. I grabbed all my stuff and headed back to Crystal Isles. The trick is to place down a foundation on top of a light pet, then switch the foundation to a block so the basilisk aggroes to the light pet but can't actually hit it. This method keeps it aggro to something so it stays put while the feeding interval goes down. I was instructed to toss out all my eggs at once. Apparently he will only eat one at a time, unlike the snake. Once I got my trap set up, I led the basilisk right to it. It worked just like it was supposed to. He aggroed to the Shinehorn and it was safe inside his little box, and he ate just one of his eggs. But, yet again, the taming meter was dropping rapidly. There was no way to get another feeding in before it went to 0. At this point, it had to be a bug. Every video I watched on how to tame this showed this is the exact strategy. There were no other dinos nearby or anything I could think of that I was doing wrong, but it just wasn't working. I figured it must have been the basilisk itself that was bugged. So, if I could just find another one, maybe I could get it to work. And I did. I found a level 15. I was hoping this one would only need a couple eggs, and even if it was bugged, I could get it fed fast enough. I was able to get him his first egg, and the taming meter shot up to over 50%. But, once again, it started dropping rapidly. Not only that, but it ate all the eggs without giving it the taming percentage. So, something was definitely wrong. It had to be bugged. The next day I moved on to tame something else. I went after a gacha. I headed out to the sunken forest and found a lowly level 20. These guys eat literally anything, so I farmed up some stone nearby and dropped him some food to eat. But once he started eating, I noticed his taming meter was dropping. What the F? I was seriously confused. I thought maybe there was a taming bug. It's entirely possible because it's happened before. When Evo events occur and rates change, sometimes certain dinos get broken. The feeding intervals can get messed up. This was once a big problem with the mantis, and so that was my assumption. 2 tames in a row where the taming meter drops way too fast? I was ready to quit at this point, if it was truly broken. I honestly didn't want to keep being let down. But since I was here, and since the gacha's feeding interval is much less than the basilisk, I figured I'd see if I could force this guy to eat fast enough. I grinded a bunch of everything nearby and just dropped and dropped and dropped it all, hoping he'd eat fast enough. And sure enough, because he eats so quickly, I was able to get enough things fed to him before the taming meter dropped too fast. I was a bit relieved. I didn't know if the game was actually bugged or if it really was just the basilisk, but I was really happy to at least have been able to get the gacha. I was still nervous though. I'd have to see on my next tame if it really is a universal taming bug. While here on Extinction, I continued grinding out the boss tributes that I would need for when I eventually attempt the Titans again. I got most of the tributes by the end of the day, but was still going to need some more hearts. At the start of the day, I did a quick run through space to see if I could find a space whale, but again, no luck. I was likely going to have to go to Gen 1 if I wanted to actually find one. For now, I had my sights set on going after a Noglin. I had to do some prep taming first though. The Noglin needs sacrifice tame, so I tamed a bunch of Brontos and Diplos. The Diplo is the better one to use, but I just went after everything I could find. So once I had 7 knocked out, I just let them slowly tame. No point in wasting my kibble or sanguine elixirs on them. I'll just stuff them with berries and do other things until they are done. No narcotics needed. There are a bunch of hyena that spawn near my base, so I made another quick, half-assed attempt at taming one. But once again, it was spooked after just 2 pets. I know I've attempted this before, but now that's 3 tames in a row where the taming meter is dropping and it feels almost impossible to tame anything. And if that gacha wasn't so low level, it probably would have been even harder to tame. This was getting incredibly annoying. I was really starting to believe that the game's taming was bugged. I started to seriously doubt being able to tame anything else that is passive. But I was really curious to see if it was even possible. So I made my way into the ocean to go after another passive tame, the Manta. I parked my Astrodelphus in a nice safe spot and I isolated the Manta I wanted. I fed him his angler gel and I swam off to safety. As I anxiously waited for his next feeding, I watched that taming meter like a hawk, hoping and praying it didn't start to drop. I waited and waited until it was ready, and when it was, I went up to feed it. Things were looking good. It even came up and attacked me while I was waiting. The taming meter didn't drop at all. This was a great sign. I'm still pretty sure the basilisk was bugged, but at least it meant there's not an overall taming bug and I can continue to press on. And once he did, I headed back to the surface to check on my sacrifice tames. I scooped up the ones that were finished and left the others to finish on their own as I ended the day and logged off. At the start of day 145, I had a sudden urge to go back to Extinction. After recently taming my first Titan, I was wanting to get back into the fight with the others, and finally get one of the Extinction Titans tamed, so I hopped on over. I flew around looking for tributes, but immediately ran into an element vein. Since I needed that also, I stopped and defended the vein quickly with Son of Steve and got the element I needed. Also, I got a good start in the hearts. Back on Gen 2, my sacrifice tames were all finished and I scooped them up. And then I finished the day crafting my gunpowder, doing a poly run, and crafting more cannon shells. I made my way back to Gen 1 because there were a couple things I wanted to tame over here. It's been a long time since I had been over here, so my last base despawned. I spent way too much time trying to put down an ocean platform and find a base. But once I did, I took out the Pelagornis that was conveniently located right next to where I was putting my spawn-in base. I didn't even come here to tame one of these. How convenient. Also super convenient, there was an Archaeopteryx. While waiting for the Pelagornis, I headed into the snow biome, and I found myself a giant monkey. I knocked it out with ease, only to be reminded that they are a passive tame, and since I didn't want to wait for it to wake up, I left it there to be crushed by the avalanche. I flew over to the pond, and I quickly knocked out a penguin. I found another monkey and this time fed him proper. But while I was waiting patiently, he got hit by the avalanche and his taming meter reset. It wasn't that high up, but I decided not to go after him right away again. I was getting ready to log off in real life and I didn't want to wait. Instead, I made my way back home to Gen 2. I got myself some sanguine elixir. That way, I could tame it even faster on another day. Back on Gen 1, my Pelagornis was finished and waiting patiently for me. I made my way back into the snow biome to find a level 50 that I decided to target. Luckily, I got him with no issues and some good old patience. The main thing I came to Gen 1 for was the Mega Shellin, aka the giant turtle, so I headed into the depths to search for a low enough level. Another thing I've never tamed before, and I was excited for this challenge. The problem was I was having trouble finding the school of fish that you need to feed them. I had to find these little fish and kite them, but they swim super slow and none of them were anywhere near the turtles. After half a day of searching and literally not finding anything. I was frustrated that I didn't even get to attempt to tame one. The day was ending, and I had to call it quits for now. As I continued checking things off my list, I was mostly going to the maps I was most familiar with for certain dinos, and I know roll rats are usually everywhere on Aberration. So I grabbed my honey and I headed over to find myself a roll rat. Just as I expected, there was one right near my base. I cleared the area and waited for him to dig his little rat hole. I dropped some honey in and watched him eat. Not much longer, he was all mine. The rest of the day was some standard maintenance. I had some gigas to imprint, a meat run to do, and more hexagons to be farmed. It was time to head back to Gen 1. I still needed to find a Mega Shalon to tame. Once again, I was having no luck though finding the school of fish. After half a day, I was getting very impatient. I don't really have the time it takes to endlessly search for what I needed. I took a quick break and went after one of the many eels on this ark. When I found my target, I used my Bazzy's immunity to absorb the eel's electricity, and in between shocks, I hopped off and fed him some biotoxin. I thought this was going to be much harder, but a pretty easy tame. And the search continued. I found a school of fish and a decent level turtle nearby. I started the slow process of trying to kite them towards him, but a tornado, a shark, and everything in between stopped that from happening. Eventually, I finally got one close, but the struggle continued. The turtle seemed to be moving so much faster than me, and I couldn't keep up. When I finally did, I couldn't get the fish to eat his barnacles and to start the taming process. I'm clearly doing something wrong here. People tame these things all the time, but it was feeling completely impossible. Before the fish could start feeding, the turtle was already halfway across the map. Anyway, I had zero patience to attempt this now that I was in the final grind. Instead, I went after an easy tame. Back to the black sandy beaches of Ragnarok to tame a Megalanion. These guys are the normal taming method, so no issues here. Once I grabbed him, I headed home to Gen 2. I made my way over to Rockwell's side and sought out an Ichthy. I grabbed my tech bow, because why would I use my long neck when I have this? Oh, that's why. So it was too strong. After killing 2, I had to go back to my base for a long neck. On day 152, I headed back to the same spot as before. I had my long neck, but still, I barely got this thing down without killing it. It had just 9 health left. I stood by to protect his fragile ass and scooped him up when he was done. I still need to get my pet leech, so I found one in the nasty waters of Rockwell's rivers, and I fish basketed him to get myself another bloodsucker. The rest of the day was dedicated to preparing for the Forest Titan. I already had the tributes, I just needed the mechs. I had to get some nameless venom quickly for my drakes. It took way longer than I wanted, and I wasted about half the day. The rest of the day I continued prepping for the upcoming fights and taming. I crafted more shells, tossed out my Rexes and leveled them and saddled them. It was time to make another attempt on the Forest Titan. I had a couple tributes to grab before I started, so I got them quick. I set up everything I needed like last time. I went into the cave and I got the artifact to start the fight. No chances this time. My Giga cleared the cave and we started the fight. This time I tried something to hopefully get the Titan not to despawn. I left a sacrifice tame in hopes he would stay aggroed. If he's aggroed to something at all times, maybe he won't despawn. I started the fight in my mech and began taking my shots at his corruption. I was struggling getting those to connect like always because of how slow they are, but I had plenty of them and plenty of time. The Ice Titan stayed spawned in for over an hour. I was backing up to get a better shot and I accidentally fell off the cliff. Don't panic, I thought to myself, he didn't despawn. So I raced back up top, and when I did, he gone. Just a dead Rex corpse left behind. Well, now I was just curious. Was it because I fell off and went a certain distance away? Last time I didn't fall off, but I did go back pretty far, so I thought maybe that's why he's despawning. I committed to attempting one more time for science, but I didn't feel like grabbing the tributes right at that moment, so that was on hold. I got back to taming on Gen 2. I grabbed my sacrificed Dilos and Brontos and went after a Noglin. I found one super quick thanks to my tech helmet and threw out my first Diplo. He latched on and the process began. I tossed out a couple more and all was going well. But it was not very smart to do this out in the open. Between fighting off other dinos and trying to keep track of the Noglin, the taming process took too long and his meter dropped. I didn't have enough sacrifice tames to keep going, so I had to call it for now. Had I not tamed that manta, I 100% would have assumed that taming is bugged at this point. But since I got him, I decided I would go back after him again in the future. The Diplos were so much better to use because the Brontos were attacking everything when the Noglin took over. That was my problem. So I went out to tame more Diplos to use because they can't attack, they only nudge. And thanks to my tech bow, I got every Diplo in the land. I also tamed Brontos and Turtles because I was very determined. I don't care if it took 100 sacrifice tames, I was getting a freaking Noglin. Something I've always wanted to tame, but as a PvE player, I just never did. I logged off and let my sauropods tame up, and upon my return, I headed out for attempt number 2. I tossed out my Diplo and the process began again. Diplos were working perfectly. The Noglin controlled one was nudging everything, but couldn't do any damage, so we were safe. It got to 90% and I was right there, so close. I threw out one more dino, it just needed to latch, and I'd be home free. But just as I was positioning the Bronto, yoink! A freaking Carniflora ate the stupid Noglin. You have got to be kidding me! I checked the taming tracker and he was definitely gone. Well, that was a surprise. I really thought I had it. I planned to use the same Diplos to go after another Noglin, but I needed them to heal first. So, it was time for my science experiment. I went back and got set up for the Forest Titan. I spawned him in and placed a couple Rexes for him to aggro to. I took some shots and he was stuck on an enemy Strider. I felt like this was going to be entirely possible doing it this way. So I continued on, trying to take down the corruption. I kept repositioning myself to avoid his attacks, but I never went far at all. I never even left my mech. And before I knew it, bugged. This is frustrating on so many levels. Mostly I was annoyed with how much time I spent on this, and I could have been doing other things in my challenge. But also I just burned all those hearts, and doing the other Titans now was gonna require more. After a couple L's in a row, I switched back to something I had more confidence in. I set my sights on the Manticore boss fight. Originally I intended to go to Scorched Earth to get the artifacts, but I just wanted it to be a quick process, so I went back to Crystal Isles. My Diplos were healed up and I was ready for attempt number 3. I had my tech bow with me, this time to shoot down any Carniflora. I found a Noglin and once more tossed out my Diplos. A smooth start, just like last time. I ran out of Diplos, so I had to use my Brontos. But with it almost complete, I made sure the area was safe and they were set to passive. I tossed out my last Bronto. Cha-ching! We got him! Now off to Gen 2 to finally get a space whale. I spawned in with my Maywing and to no surprise, I found multiple right away. I really should have just come here long ago. Now the trick was to get one close enough to land so I could hit him with my mech. I shot at one far away to aggro it, and when it got close I took my shots. He was aggroed to my Maywing, but stuck, so I had an easy shot. But after 2 cannon shells, I accidentally killed him. Oops. I was gonna have to find a higher level if this was gonna work. So I found one nearby and took my shots. As it was coming closer and closer, both my shells appeared to miss. But as I was repositioning, I noticed he wasn't moving. So I checked him, and apparently I got him. He was knocked out. Not sure how that worked, but I'll take it. I stuck by him to make sure nothing happened, and I scooped him up when he was done. Back on Gen 2, I finished getting ready for my next fight with leveling and saddling my Rexes. I headed out to Scorch to get set up, tossed out my Rexes, and started the Alpha Manticore fight. Here we go. My Rexes got to work right away. Immediately, his health started to drop rapidly. The death worms started spawning in, but my Rexes dealt with them with ease. They waited patiently for the manticore to land, and when it did, my Rexes obliterated it. Victory! I had more to tame on Crystal Isle, so I started out the day there. I was after a Tropiognathus. After taking some time to find one, I got a trap set up and made my first attempt. Well, I had hoped to at least. By the time the trap was set up, it was nowhere to be found, which is weird because it didn't take that long. But off I was to find a new one. I built a new trap in a new spot and I aggroed the trap to me. But I had no idea that they can grab you. Thankfully, I had my tech boots on, so no harm done. I got him in the trap, netted him, and set up my ballista turret. Everything was looking good, now I just needed to lower his health. So, he would be hungry. If you don't do this, it's an impossibly long tame. So I got him very, very close to death. But apparently, I got him too close to death. Instead of healing up on his own, he died. RIP. I searched 30 minutes for another one, but I could not find a single one. I had to log off in real life, and so I called it a day. I did not know at the time that this would be my final day in Ark Survival Evolved ever. By now, if you haven't looked at the video time, there's not much left. This was indeed my last day in Ark. I had some real life things come up and it prevented me from going right up until the moment the server shuts down. I stopped short just a couple of days, so there would not have been a whole lot more progress anyways. But oh my god, this has been an insane grind. One of the most fun, challenging, and grindy things I've ever done in life, not just in a video game. 160 hours of gameplay and probably over 200 hours of editing. As much as I would have loved to complete this challenge, I am so happy I made the decision not to take it overly serious. It truly made this experience so much better and so much more fun. Would it have been awesome to complete my challenge? Of course. It pains me to think about all the distractions, all the time wasted, and all the inefficiencies, like spending 10 days building a base. But it was never about setting a record or any sort of clout. I just did this because I love this game, and even after thousands of hours, there were so many things I hadn't done. So many dinos I never even tamed. I learned so much more about the game that I never would have discovered. And I cannot wait to continue this journey in Ark Survival Ascended. Perhaps I will come back at it with an actual strategy and attempt this challenge the way a speedrunner would. Yeah, that kind of sounds fun. I just want to thank each and every one of you. You have all showed so much love and support. I appreciate it more than you know. I am so happy to be able to share this journey with you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Be well. I'll be seeing you soon.